And good morning. We're live. We are broadcasting from the Isle of Man. It's MannTalk. And this morning I'm joined by Michael, Josem and Derek Flint. And it's...
Good morning.
Morning, Michael. Morning, Derek.
Good morning.
It's opposite ends of the scale. We might only be, 50 miles away. You're going into lockdown and we're coming out of lockdown. Howie and Ashy delivered good news last night on the propaganda lid of Manx Radio, and it's looking good on our side, but not good for you. It's not looking pretty from what Priti Patel was delivering on the news.
No, it's pretty shocking, really. I mean, that was Boris yesterday over in Disbury talking about these fantastic flood defences that haven't really worked, but it's all very positive stuff, and people are working very hard. So that's a huge comfort to the people of Didsbury once they're slopping out again. But talking about the fact that don't make any plans for Easter, and then Priti was there at the presser talking about don't make any plans for the summer. So that's going to put my trip down to the Cornish Riviera and Rick Stein's on hold in August. I think it's really quite concerning, really, because as I put on Twitter yesterday, we're really sort of starting to watch the decimation of a nation here, and it affects the UK profoundly, but it also affects the Isle of Man because, unfortunately, bar the odd freedom travel direct flight to the Sun, you've got to really come through the UK before you go anywhere else, and obviously you guys there are locked down in Alcatraz. I don't really think we're going to see any improvement for the island until we see some massive improvement over here. The two are conjoined without a doubt. So it's depressing for us, and it would be nice to get back out of this circuit breaker lockdown and get back to Costa and all that sort of stuff and back in the pub. But it's only a bit of a sweetener, really, in terms of the overall picture. I mean, it's crackers. We hadn't seen our kids for over a year. We still haven't seen them. I can't go to Japan to visit the young fella. I can't even go down to London to visit my daughter. So we're in some way we're more heavily taxed, and we're not actually better off at the moment. Where the end of the tunnel is right now, I'm really struggling to see.
Well, here on Alcatraz, Michael, Ashy and Howie have given us the keys to get out the cell. We're in the exercise yard, and maybe we've got a bit of a day release coming. It's got to be good news for you, Michael.
Yeah, let's hope so. I think there is light at the end of the tunnel. It is frustrating that they've extended the lockdown by an extra few days, and when we went into this back on the 8th of January, the Chief Minister talked about 14 days of no new community spread. Now the hurdle is being moved to 16 or 21 days. And I think that we're increasingly realising that this is not a scientific exercise, but rather it's a political exercise, whereby they do what they think is politically popular, not necessarily what is scientifically consistent. But, let's be hopeful we can get out of this because, as someone, who it's currently illegal for me to hug someone. And it's a pretty miserable situation. And I think there was a wonderful speech by Charles Walker in the House of Commons earlier this week where he said, look, for some people who are having a great lockdown, good for you. I'm glad for you. But there are a lot of people, as we've spoken about here on previous episodes, where, the rise of domestic violence and, and let us, think of the person, the woman who lost her life in what is allegedly a domestic violence incident up in Andreas the other day. Not necessarily, I don't want to attribute any causation with the lockdown, but there's certainly a correlation. And in that sense, there is the domestic violence, there's the mental health. I see, many of my friends, many who are parents, increasingly finding it difficult to juggle the needs of educating their children and working to earn a living. And that's a tough situation. And so while there are some people who are having a great lockdown, good for you, there are a lot of people doing it tough.
Well, it has been a tough week, and I'm sure the burden has been heavy on the emergency services and all parties. We don't really want to discuss about the major incidents that have happened, but the headlines of detail that we've had a murder inquiry open up in Andreas, and then the dreadful, tragic news of a fatal accident involving a cyclist at St John's hit us as well. So you can imagine the pressure. And not just from that, there's multiple road accidents, and there'll be God knows what going on with COVID cases going to court. Derek, the force must be buckling.
It's going to be really struggling at the moment because there's no doubt they'll be depleted in some respect with people shielding. I was talking to a former colleague last night who's been off for quite some time with some chronic ailments, The problem is that, again, the things I can't reconcile are things like, well, we had a cause and effect thing last time in terms of road traffic collisions. We the speed limit and collisions went down, and it was fairly well conformed with. This time, we've done nothing about it. We're in a time of year when the weather is 10 times worse than it was last time, and the number of collisions has been off the scale. I presume the majority of these people have been travelling because they need to, but whether or not it's an actually speed-related collision or not, the fact that you actually put a threshold on speed sends a message out to people and says, listen, hang on a minute, we could really do with you staying on the tarmac here. Please drive a little bit more care, and generally people do. So how that's been factored out of the risk assessment this time, I'm not entirely sure. It's one of those things where there's no consistency, and I think this is if you like, a commentator on government for quite some time now. My main criticism has been that lack of consistency in terms of approach, in terms of policy application, and so on. So yeah, I really do feel for our former colleagues, mate, because they will be, without a doubt, feeling the pinch. A murder investigation doesn't just stop at the charge. There's an awful lot of work to do there. A fatal road traffic collision is a complex beast and takes time and resources and a lot to unravel. So there's a lot of work to be done there. So I hope they're doing okay in what are very difficult times.
Well, we don't want to go into too much detail about the cyclist losing his life, but that is 3 cyclists in the last 5 or 6 years or so, and I think the location of the incident is going to raise some questions, and we'll leave it at that. We don't want to dwell too much there at the moment.
With interest.
Well, let's just say there, Jed, let us send out our thoughts and our prayers and our best wishes to the family. It must be a very difficult time, especially with such a sudden and unexpected tragedy, and must be incredibly heartbreaking for them. And I'm sure we are all unified in saying, it's a tough time, and our thoughts and our prayers and our hopes go to the family and the friends who are struggling.
Yeah. It is desperate. Now, just we'll talk to you, Michael, about your article on the website, michaeljosem.com, full of lots of interesting material, and my attention was drawn to your observations about £1 million being thrown at the education service. What's the story?
Well, 6 months ago, the Education Department said, and let me quote from a news article at the time, that they didn't have enough money to pay for any additional money for teachers. However, and let me quote, they said any pay settlement would have to be met through cuts to educational provision, which sounded very dark. But now the Isle of Man government is singing a very different tune, with them announcing this week a plan to spend £1 million on employing a whole new suite of education department bureaucrats. And it seems to me that this government just flicks back and forth like a metronome. In that 6 months ago they said they didn't have enough money to pay for teachers, and now they're able to find £1 million here for a whole new range of officers. It is extraordinary. And my view is very simple: is that we should pay frontline workers fairly for the work that they do, and instead of creating more of these public servants, these back office roles, we should focus on the students. And I think that's, this, when we have this government, just blows whichever way the wind follows, whichever way the wind blows. And I think it's really, disappointing that on one hand they say we don't have enough money to pay teachers more, but we do have enough money to find here a whole range of new bureaucrats.
So this is on the back of, I think it was called the Beeman's report, where the whole governance and infrastructure at the top level was examined. It was found to be completely deficient. It's been criticised greatly. But didn't we have the same thing happen to the health service a few years ago? And again, lots of new management positions created. But are they new people? Is it going to be the same old story? I don't know. Are they accountable? Have we got an ombudsperson to look over this? Is there more confidence in what we're dealing with, Derek?
I think one of the big issues for me is that poor management leadership seems to be sanctionless on the Isle of Man. You just end up getting a pat on the head, a payoff, and wander off into the ether. And there are usually good people left behind who could step up to the plate and will know where the bones are buried, will know how to fix the service. But all we seem to do is just create put more people in place. That is not the panacea. A good, solid leadership team should be able to express themselves across a wide base of their people, and with an empowered service, that, if you like, that double layer bureaucracy just shouldn't be needed. Most teachers, I go back to my primary school days and my secondary school days. Most of my teachers were pretty much self-contained, highly resilient individuals. They managed their classroom, they managed their marking loads, they managed their professional development. They were respected. There was the odd tosser amongst them, of course there was. But overall, that they were supported by the head to get on with the job and do the best for their pupils. Now you're answering Ofqual this and Ofsted that, and there's layers and layers and layers of bureaucracy in place. It doesn't make any sense. Train people well, support them well, empower them, lead them, and evangelize, and you will end up with a really, really good education or health service. But it just seems to be almost like the Father Ted answer in terms of let's just say another mass and hope everything will be okay. It doesn't work like that. There needs to be a real reset and a real rethink. And yes, okay, to a certain extent, you've got to follow nationally recognised structures to achieve the result, but you can do it in a lean and agile manner. But we just seem to miss that every time. I think somebody comes up with a magic paper, minister rubber stamps it, and off you go. And to be honest with you, I'd have expected better from Alex. He's a wise, clever man, and I think he's just been hoodwinked on this one.
Well, I mean, the likes of the education system, I'm not too familiar really of what our performance is on the island. I'm not hearing a great deal, but my attention was drawn to a tweet from Annette Baker, who, she's a head teacher, isn't she? Or former head teacher, I think.
It is or was, yeah.
And it was something
due to retire,
which Jason Scales raised, and he said that I do wish Isle of Man government would invest in a new stable video feed, and he could have been referring to the Tynwald broadcast where it all went wrong, and it's not only the oldest parliament in the world, they've got the oldest kit in the world, because it was quite embarrassing. But Annette Baker, she came up with a lovely thought, and it said, spare a thought for teachers trying to engage multiple students and classes online using the same IT infrastructure during this lockdown and last. And I must admit that you could have kids from all kinds of backgrounds and their education is going to be put under pressure. But is it going to suffer as a result of the technical equipment that they've got in the house? Not everyone's got wireless routers and up-to-date laptops and iPads. Michael, surely there's a case for throwing £1 million on furnishing the delivery of excellence that way.
Yeah, you're right, and it doesn't just apply to teachers; it applies to a lot of people working from home and a lot of people in different different industries. And so we have this government, and they're always very sneaky with their wording here, and that is that they promise that the cables, the fibre cables, will run past X percent of homes by a given date. But my home already has fibre cables running past it, but I can't get on it. And so this is a government that is building an information superhighway, but there's no on-ramps. And increasingly, I think what we need to do is we need to get people the infrastructure that they need. That was, as you boys will remember, when I ran for Tynwald last year, that idea of investing in important infrastructure was core to my platform. But we need to get away from these sneaky, lawyerly definitions of cables running past people's homes and get it so it actually gets into people's homes.
Absolutely, precisely. We've got to modernise as a nation, and we've got to attract new business. We've got to attract biotech and beyond. And I must admit, these press conferences where what's the motivation to eradicate the virus on the Isle of Man? Is it to improve our lifestyle? Is it to enhance our quality of life, return to normality? Or is it just to shut Dr. Glover up? Is it? Is that? I'm just sensing this air of smugness that we don't need the genomics, and once these infections disappear, it can just be forgotten about altogether. I mean, Derek, you've got a view on this about attracting industry to the Isle of Man.
Well, it's the old PR and comms thing, isn't it? In terms of setting yourself up as world class and wanting to chase the biomed and biotech sector. And then standing up as chief minister and saying, hey, we've got experts, but our experts aren't as good as the ones in Liverpool. We're going to Liverpool and sod the local provision. Massively undermining the sector, Isle of Man PLC. And I wasn't just the only one that picked up on this. I did tweet about it. But Jason Scales, a chap there that's invested quite a lot of money in Hub Isle of Man and trying to bring about an incubator sort of centre for businesses, picked up on it as well. He was fuming about it. But it's one of those own goals that the island just keeps seeming to score. There was a real opportunity, even if what taxigenomics had to offer was a little bit below par, a little bit clunky. The fact that you could advertise, hey, you know what, we chased an in-house solution to this, rather than this custard approach in terms of, well, we don't like her, we're not going to work with her, and that's it. And that's very much how it's coming across. It's like a child's playground tiff where the bigger bully has overcome common sense by actually trying to work together for a solution. Really disappointing. I think the comms team back at the Cabinet Office maybe need to have a bit of a sit down and think about how they're going to recover that, because it is a real own goal for people that are working really hard to try and bring business to the Isle of Man. And let's face it, at the moment, you can't even buy a house on the Isle of Man because the estate agents are shut for some bizarre reason. So when you're trying to attract people there and attract businesses there, you need as much help as you can get.
Well,
I go a little bit further than what Derek says there, in that I don't think it's just an issue of communications, but I think it's an issue of substance, in that we know that we have currently, the government yesterday announced that there were two cases, two people who were infected with the coronavirus, where they were not yet able to track where that outbreak came from, because they're still waiting on the results from Liverpool. They after 2 weeks, they were able to get the previous set back from Liverpool. It took 2 weeks to get the data back, and they were able to use that information to link those cases, these other cases, to an existing outbreak. So now we're waiting on information back from Liverpool. Dr. Glover has offered to do that sort of stuff for free. She can do it locally, just up the road in Onken. It's very accessible. It's 10 minutes up the road from where I'm sure the government is based. And I think it is just not just an issue of communications or smugness, but it's an issue of substance. And I think that the government needs to put aside its pathetically petty, personal, political peccadillos and focus on the substance. And the substance is, let's get this done for the benefit of the people of the Isle of Man, because that's what matters.
Perfect alliteration there, Michael. I'm just wondering is how much of the trail, the scent when we're tracking down people that are infected, how much have we lost, Derek? Do you think we could have contained the spread of the virus if we had been right on it and we'd had a robust policy regarding testing for people who come back to the island? We could have avoided this, couldn't we?
I think it's weird because it's almost like the spending money to save money and then saving money to spend money. These things cost. There's no doubt about it. Whether it's in time, resources, or the chemical side of things that work all these things out. But they've currently said that they can't do. What was it? They decided they couldn't do because it was going to cost £450,000 a month. Now I'm no Rachel Riley, but I couldn't make the sums add up to what Alf Cannon was claiming on that. But we're all, it's shit or bust time now, to be honest with you. If they're going for this to return to this policy of elimination, which of course was always their policy, which it wasn't, but never mind. If they're going to go back to elimination, that's fine. But what you've got to make sure is you don't get this happening time after time after time. Work out what it is that's going to actually catch this at the door and then take it from there. A friend of mine, she's just gone to visit family in Thailand, and she had to have a test before she left, flew in, met at the airport, test, and you're going to this hotel and you're staying there for 14 days and you're not leaving your room. And you know what? They actually turned it into a nice experience. On day 2, I mean, the food's been great, as you expect from Thailand. But on day 2, a lovely pair of wicker slippers arrived from the government, in terms of, hope your lockdown's not too hard, in a nice box and everything. And just little things like that in terms of, hey, we're trying to look after you here. Is absolutely brilliant. But again, it's all down to sort of PR and marketing, and the thinking about that bigger picture here. And it's working in Thailand for a company which is of such dense population. Rates are very, very low. They're catching it at the door. I really don't know what the answer is, to be honest with you. We tried the isolation hotels. That went down like a fart in a lift. Then we tried the home stuff. That's been abused from time to time. But I think what we're missing here, and what we're not actually saying, is, hey, what caused this? Now, there was a lot of stuff going on around Christmas. I'm not going to speculate, but there was a lot more people that came into the island that might not have done. Somewhere there was a chink in the armour. I really do wonder what caused this. And we're not actually getting a lot of answers from government in terms of what that was.
Michael.
I think Derek is spot on there in that the figure that the Alf Cannon quoted was £420,000. If you divide that by 2,000 tests a month, which would be about 700 people, getting tested 3 times, and that works out to be about £200 a test, which would be the world's most expensive coronavirus tests. So I don't understand how the minister came up with those numbers. But even if you take those numbers at face value, then let me give you the hot tip that £420,000 on testing is still a lot cheaper than the cost of an outbreak on the Isle of Man.
Mm-hmm. I'll have that.
Yep. Big time. There's been a big drain on the Treasury with all the support, but it's not just about that, is it? It's about the lost trade, it's the lost livelihoods, lost businesses. And we are suffering, and we are going to have our borders shut, I would forecast, till September. And our tourism industry is going to take a dive. Now, Derek, you picked up on the new proposed hotel, Port Erin Breakwater. I've just put a photograph up on the screen. You can't see it, but I was quite impressed, really. I think hotel, apartments, it's got to be moved the right way.
Yeah, anything's an improvement. I looked at that site for a distillery a few years ago, which would have been great, and unfortunately my funding round just wasn't in place at the time. But fair play to them. That is a big commitment for that site, both in terms of logistical engineering side of things, let alone anything else. Several £1 million worth of investment there. Fair play to them, and I hope it works out. But there's a philosophy, isn't there, in terms of build it and they will come, and it's probably these high-end developments that are really needed now. And you know, your favourite one there in terms of Castletown Golf Links Hotel. The only thing I'll say is that there's got to be a good reason that Dandara hasn't actually progressed that to date. They are savvy operators, so there's clearly that lack of confidence at quite a high level, which is sort of undermining the overall effort. But then, hey, listen, everything's going to be fine, because once the borders are open, millions are going to come and see the horse trams from the mouth of
Edmund.
South with it.
Yeah.
South. Yeah, you know. So rejoice at that news. It's been well worth the 2.1 million quid overspend in terms of extra investment for rails and so on. Thank God that whoever decided to sign the cheque for that one had the foresight, because that's going to really turn things around.
I'm hoping he was misquoted on that one, but Michael, you live in Douglas. You've seen it all happening right in front of you. What was your take on that?
So I think that, to be fair to the poor guy who's departing in his role as director of Manx National Heritage, I think it is. I don't think he quite uttered those words, but rather I think that was the paraphrasing introduced by Manx Radio, and so. You know, I'm a simple man, and I just think that when the government came up with its retrospect, what we subsequently discovered were false excuses when they were wanting to protect the horse tram because they claimed that there was some sort of contract with tourist suppliers, and then the Isle of Man newspaper investigated this and found that there were no such contracts, and that the government was just telling mistruths again, and it's. You know, I sort of like the horse trams in that I think they're a nice, you know, bit of cultural heritage. But I remember that when I lived on the prom, I didn't enjoy them coming home, and when they go up and down, they make such a racket, and also just the traffic harms that they cause. And so I sort of feel like there's got to be a better way of doing this, and that also raises the situation. If these are such a wonderful tourist attraction, which I find difficult to believe, then I don't understand why the government is only laying the horse tram track half the way, stopping work, and then planning to dig up the prom yet again to lay the rest of the horse tram next year, or this year now. It is just silly madness. You know, I remember that I think it was in 2020. Yeah, it would have been in 2020, beginning of last year. I was chatting to a guy when who talked about how expensive it was to take him and his family of four. It cost him 10 quid to take the horse tram the length of the prom. And I thought, you think that's expensive? Well, the taxpayer paid an additional £90 for that trip. You know, the going rate was about £24, I think it was, or £23 per person that was being paid by the taxpayer per journey. And so if you think if it's rough to pay 10 quid for a family of four to go the length of the prom on the horse tram, you know, have a thought about the poor taxpayer who got like an extra £90 for that journey.
Well,
it is scandalous.
It's remarkable. I in the course of my business, I've handled, say, I don't know, directly over 3,000 customers, tourists, cruise ship visitors, day trippers, golfers, all kinds of tourism groups right across the board. And I can think of a handful who've actually chosen to go on the horse trams. Okay. That is a fact. Okay. And then
was that not was that not on Gary Barlow's rider that he needed to go on the horse trams when he came to do his concert? Was that not?
No, he wasn't. It wasn't even. He did the coastal walk down in the south, which was fantastic, round to the Sound, and he did the Instagram post that was like fed out to 4 million. That was lovely, but
horse trams.
No, when we look at the horse trams and what they bring to the island and what they cost, there is a place for them. It's part of the heritage. Personally, for me, they're a traffic hazard. I'm not convinced about the actual whether there's some cruelty issues with the horses. Occasionally, you'll get one dying on the tarmac, which is pretty horrific. And I think it could be one man's folly. I think it could be one person who's kind of steered this, along parallel lines, of course, who steered this, and we're all paying the price for this utter stupidity. Because in the next few years, okay, when we do get the borders open, we've got an opportunity to tap into a great market, because there are 7 million people that travel from the UK abroad per year, and there's going to be a portion of that amount who won't feel safe to travel. There won't be the cheap airlines to get abroad. There's going to be issues where people are just going to want to stay in the confines of Great Britain. And we've got these fantastic tourism groups that go to Prague, that go to Tallinn, that go to these European cities, and they want to have a good time, which is basically do an activity, do something outdoorsy, and have a shed load of beer and listen to some great music and meet some new people. And I think if we could just harness that somehow in Douglas and beyond, we've got the nature, we've got the walks and what have you, but if we could just capture that, you're talking 1 or 2%, and that's it. Our tourism is done.
I don't know. I think you're going to see the likes of Spain, Portugal, whose economies are on their arse, going again, digging deep and saying, right, we just underwrite tourism. We get people back. People are going to be screaming for a bit of sun, for that heat in their bones. We can't compete with that, and our prices will still be sky high. The packet's been bleeding cash like nothing else on earth, with its unnecessary twice a day sailing of the Ben, where they could have actually cut their operating cost by 50%. They just can't compete, and I think the other thing is as well, because the plug's out on the economy, both in the UK and in the Isle of Man. Once that stopper goes back in, there's going to be a very, very shallow pool of cash. And I think there's going to be things that government really needs to take a long, hard look at and actually can't afford to do. And running a tram service along a prom at a loss may be one of those. Running an international motorcycle event at a loss might actually end up with a rethink. It depends how bad it is, and it depends how brave the next administration is, because let's be right, the problem is now being kicked down the road for the next incumbents to take on after September 21.
Michael is...
Yeah, I feel like there's a bit of an unusual situation for me to say I agree with Derek so much, but I sort of do there, in that I'm very sceptical of people who claim that people won't want to, like British tourists won't want to leave the UK and these isles. Because let me give you the hot tip. After being in lockdown and unable to leave the island since, when it was March last year now, I would really like to go sit on a beach or a swimming pool with a beer in the sun. I think that sounds absolutely divine.
Oh, yeah.
And so these predictions that people won't want to go overseas from the UK or from these isles, they won't want to go. I'm very sceptical of that, because I like the idea, a bit of a souvlaki in Greece. There's a particular one I remember that I went to a few years ago. It was lovely. It was three euros it was, and they would deliver to you from the local souvlaki shop or local gyros shop, depending on where you're from, to you while you were sitting by the pool. And I thought that was the best thing in the world. And so I'm a little bit skeptical that people won't want to leave these isles to go on holiday in the future.
You know what, Michael? I'm there. I can feel the rays of the sun. My body's yearning for it. But Derek, I'll just throw. I'll just throw something at you, Derek. The TT has had 2 years. How is the scene going to be furnished regarding racing teams, riders, up-to-date bikes? Has the moss grown over the track? Is there going to be life still in the event?
Tough one, isn't it? I mean, the glory days, going back to well, the glory days were pre-76, weren't they? But even when I first moved to the island, 98, 99, 2000, you had the Honda Village, and Kawasaki and Yamaha had works teams and so on. Those days have gone. They're all sort of loosely supported factory teams now that have private sponsors. The companies that have sponsored these teams are on the bones of their arse. Unless you've got Ineos in there sponsoring you, you're going to be really struggling for cash. The private individuals that enter, and it is their life, may well have had very little work. So the first question is, what's going to come back to actually compete in the event? That is something that's going to be under risk. Then you've got the likes of more accessible events and cheaper to get to events, Oliver's Mount and the new diamond races down on the Isle of Wight, which are going to have cash thrown at them to make them a success. We've got the Northwest 200 now, which is cancelled for another year. These things, as road racing starts to deplete, is very much harder to start to drag back. And there was an interesting thing on Facebook the other day. I follow Chris Harris, who's one of the Top Gear presenters. I like Chris. I think he does a great job. And he's actually currently got a kickback against supercars and the journalism around those. He's building a Westfield, like a little Lotus 7 thing, because he says that's where more fun is. It's not as fast, but it's proper driving. So are we going to see a kickback against that sort of environment, that sort of stuff? Because we're coming out, at the end of the day, we're coming out of a war zone when this is all done and dusted. America has lost more of their people than they lost in the Second World War. And I think these things are only being laid bare now because it's been a bit of a sort of war by stealth, really. It's gone on in the background. It's not necessarily affected anybody, but millions and millions of people are dying across the globe. So I think there's a big reckoning to be had, and things like TT are going to struggle, especially if there's not the government money to throw at it. Because I think, if I was going into politics on the island between now and September, these are the questions I'd be posing to the public in terms of, well, we're going to be pretty much broke at the end of this. Where do you want the money spending? What do you want to do? Do you want to just keep holding on to the past and throwing more cash at it in the hope that it'll have another rebirth, or do we think again about how we approached our place in the world and be a bit more realistic?
Well, Michael, TT fans, TT visitors, old or young, what are they?
I think one of the good things about the TT is that it attracts a variety of different people, and in that sense, I think there's a lot of hope for the future. But I think that one of the things that we do need to do is we need to look forward 50 years to the future, not 50 years to the past. And we've got to think about what will work in 2070 and not about what did work in 1970. And so in that sense, I think we've got to look to the future. Well, I hope that the TT is part of it. I think it's a beautiful thing, and that cultural heritage is valuable in that we've got to, take what works and look to the future.
Yeah, I always tell people it's one of those things they've got to see once in a life. They've got to go and do it, whether they're into bikes or not. But I hope I hope the work's being done now to try and get something ready to go 2022, because it's been a long time out of the picture.
It's going to be fascinating, isn't it? Because a lot of names aren't going to be there. They will have retired gracefully and they will have survived, if you like, but I can't see the teams being there at the moment. So we could be looking at a completely different event. Well, gents, we're just coming up to 38 minutes of broadcast. Thank you very much. I think we can reconnect next week. We've got a few topics to go back to. I'd love to have talked about Loganair. Did you see that one? They're cashing in about, what is it, 5 million?
5 million. They must be laughing all the way to the bank. That I would say that deal has probably underpinned their bottom line this year. Absolutely incredible. And again, Jason Scales picked up on a lot of the stuff in terms of other airlines were clamoring to do the deal, but somehow there was no competitive tender process or whatever, and the check was signed for them. So, maybe one for a little bit more research and for a bit of a scrum down and an aviation special next week.
Indeed, and of course at the airport it's got a change of use now. It's going to be the vaccine hub. That's going to be interesting. I hope you don't get charged for parking, but we're all going to be shuffling in there. Michael, you'll be way down the line being a youngster. Your vaccination is going to must be like July, August, possibly.
Oh, if then, let's hope so. Let's hope they ramp it up. I think that it's really important that we help those people who are vulnerable. I've got various friends in their 20s who work in the Department of Health and Social Care, and it made me feel very uneasy to see people in their 20s getting their vaccines already when there are still people in the 70s and 80s who have only just been invited. So for many people, they only just sent out the final batch of letters to over 80s yesterday to invite them to get their vaccination, which I think is remarkable. And I think it's really incumbent now. We got to ramp this up. We're vaccinating so far at about half the rate of the United Kingdom, and it's really weird that the government says, we're getting the same number of doses as the United Kingdom. But we're only putting half as many into people's arms. And I saw a wonderful phrase the other day. It is not vaccines that save lives, but vaccinations. And we need to get those vaccinations happening, because waiting is just putting people's lives at risk.
I'm a little bit worried, though. I'm sure you've both seen the headlines about these new variants and whether the current vaccines can actually fight them off. So we're going back to masks with closed borders. This Brazilian, this South African variant, it can overcome the current vaccine. Is that right? Possibly?
Well, it's possible, but I think that's very unlikely. And so even if the vaccine is not perfect, it is certainly going to reduce the risk. So let's get them done. And one of the good things about this new mRNA vaccine technique that Moderna pioneered is that it can be adjusted very quickly and very easily. The thing that is remarkable is that this vaccine that they produced, they designed over a weekend. Literally in 72 hours, it took them to design the vaccine, and the ensuing 10 months was all. So they designed it a year ago, but it's taken a year to get out, and that is going through the testing, going through the clinical trials to ensure it's safe. But now that we've done that, it'll be, I think this is a wonderful new technology that could be almost on par with the initial invention of vaccines, by Pasteur and Jennings, 150 years ago, however long it was. And so that is, this could be groundbreaking new technology that will be very fast and offers wonderful opportunities for the future.
Oh, and what a lovely thought to finish off with. I think we'll just draw it to a close. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Have a lovely weekend, and we'll keep an eye on events, and we'll reconnect next week. So goodbye.
All the best, fellas.